None of them never worked for me. None of them, they never went to any places that I ever hung around because I didn't hang around that many places unless you're involved in politics.
Welcome. This is part 3 of the John Wayne Gacy case. I am going to go back to back to back to back, and we're going to get all of the information that we can, a absolute deep dive into the mind of him and all of his crimes. So, welcome. This is part 3. I hope you guys have watched 1 and 2 and joined the discussion there. And we're going to move on very quickly. Here we go. So in the story right now, we are at the part where he is living on Summerdale. He moved into this house and he got married for the second time and had stepkids. And those kids and that wife was in that house while he was doing some of the unalivings. They did not know this was going on. He kept it a secret, but it was a very good kept secret for a while, and then it all unraveled. So the big thing was that John Wayne Gacy kept withholding marital activities from his wife. She got upset about that. She was like, what is going on? And then she started seeing men come in and out of the house. That is when she was like, I've had enough, I'm done, and left. She did not realize he was SAing or unaliving or whatever he was doing to these men and young men and boys. But he had to keep appearances up, right? So he's this contractor. He is this nice guy that everybody loves, that everybody thinks is a great person. And oh no, your wife left you. Well, they don't know why, because people back then didn't talk about it. And he's still keeping up these big parties and having people over to a house where he unalived young men and put them in the yard and in the crawl spaces. And what's even worse is he used that contractor job to lure men. So he would use this job to say, oh, I need to hire you guys. Come over, we'll do an interview. And at the interview, he would then attack them. And we're going to get into that later. But at this time, he was also doing children's parties dressed as Pogo the Clown. Give me a more horrifying picture, but this is the world we live in. And people would hire him. I'm not even joking. He would go to like children's hospitals. He would have children's parties of prominent figures in this town. He would go and entertain children dressed as a clown. Now, from what we know, he did not do anything to the children at these parties. But he did admit being dressed as Pogo while assaulting young men. And it's a way to earn their trust. They think this guy is this wonderful guy that goes to children's parties and not realizing what all he is doing. It's terrifying. So he began SAing young boys again. This time he would take them to his own home to do it. And this is when things just started escalating for him. He wasn't getting enough, he wasn't doing enough, and it snowballed into what we see later. He had a routine. He would have these men come over. He would convince them either that you're going to get a contracting job, or he would earn their trust in a certain way. Then, when they were there, he would try to slip them something in their drink. Now, this is where it gets terrifying, because this was his way of doing things. He would say to them, I am Pogo the Clown, but I'm also a magician, and I do these tricks. So he would handcuff himself with his hands behind his back, use a key, get out, and be like, look, I got myself free. And expecting these boys to be entertained. They would have a good laugh, and then he would say, your turn. He would put the handcuffs on them and then assault them. Terrifying, because now you're in a position where you're in a man's home. He has slipped you something and you're handcuffed. And they did not know what a monster he was. After this, the assault would begin. I'm not going to go into full detail. I've gone into a lot of detail about Gacy's lives, but the thing that I'm not going to talk about a lot is the assaults, because they're horrific and I don't want to do that. But there was objects used, there was, he would tie them up. It was the most horrific thing. Let's just say that. What I found as an interesting detail, though, is that a lot of these crimes took place between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., which is like a lot of what people think are like the witching hours. A lot of people say like nothing good happens between those hours. And here we are having young men be unalived during this hours. Now, after these assaults, Gacy would then unalive them. And if you thought the essays were bad, the unalivings were horrific. They were torture. They were letting someone pass and then bringing them back, and then letting them pass and then bringing them back, sometimes underwater, sometimes with around the neck. This method of doing things is horrendous. And like I said, it's human torture. And it just made, starting to tear up. It made my stomach turn researching about this, because woof. John Wayne Gacy did this to at least 33 men that we know of. There is, I gotta get together. Sorry. There is a lot unknown about how many victims there are, and some of the victims still remain unknown who they are. I am going to dedicate a whole separate video where I go through and just show the pictures and the stories of the victims. I think that's the best way to approach this. I think me just saying their names isn't enough. I want you to see them. I want you to hear their stories, and more importantly, see their ages. When I say these boys were young, they were between 14 and 21 years old. These were babies. These were young men who had to have been so scared and so helpless and didn't know what was going on. And he not only SA'd them, unalived them, but he also put them in a crawl space and just loved them. And they were there for years upon years upon years. And it's creepy, but it's also just so disrespectful. Now, most of these were between 1976 and 1978, and that is the years that he was divorced. And he was alone in that house, and it was just like back to back to back to back. They're not identified, and they're still unknown. There's still family who don't know that their family member was a Gacy victim, and I think that just really touches my heart. His first victim was just 16 years old, and I can't imagine what they were thinking. I can't imagine how terrified they are, and I also can't imagine what John Wayne Gacy was going through, being his first one, and why it escalated in such a manner like that. The things that I say about Gacy is because multiple unalivers are interesting, right? The things that Gacy went through is interesting. It's not a pass. It's not a pass. He did terrible, horrible, horrible things to a lot of people. And I think what he got was what he deserved, to be honest. But looking back and remembering these victims, especially since they're unidentified, is definitely one of my missions of my channel, is to talk about those who can't talk. So join me in the next part. Look out for that video of the victims. Please share that, get that out. But join me in the next part where we're going to talk about him getting caught, court, and his eventual demise. So I will see you guys next time.